What if I told you that the darkest secrets of the Gilded Age were not kept in bank vaults, but in the memories of those who had no voice? Behind the majestic facades of Fifth Avenue and Newport mansions, dramas unfolded, witnessed only by silent shadows in black dresses and white aprons. These women saw their masters without masks. They knew the true price of every diamond and every false kiss in public. Their main virtue was not hard work, but the ability to become invisible and deaf at the right moment. The history of the maids of that era is a chronicle of suppressed emotions, fear of losing their jobs, and endless sympathy for those they served. It was a world where wealth did not guarantee happiness, but only imposed golden chains of obligation on women. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how one careless phrase or one extra glance could ruin a life, and why silence was valued more than gold. Want to know a secret that will change your perception of intimacy? It is important to understand that the chambermaid knew much more about her mistress than her own husband or confessor. She was the first person the lady saw in the morning and the last to blow out the candle in her bedroom at night. A strange, almost mystical bond developed between them, woven from intimate moments of dressing and quiet conversations. The maid saw not the formal portrait of a socialite, but a living woman with her fears, fading beauty, and emotional wounds. She tightened the corset, restraining not only her mistress's breath, but also her confessions, which sometimes escaped her lips in moments of despair. Every fold in the dress, every stray curl was her responsibility and her battlefield. Sometimes this connection became so close that the maid began to adopt her mistress's mannerisms and habits. She wore her old dresses, smelled of her perfume, and involuntarily copied her gestures. This created the illusion of belonging to high society, which was deceptive and bitter. After all, at any moment, a cold tone of command could bring her back down to earth, reminding her of her true place. And therein lay the main tragedy, being so close to the fire, but never having the right to truly warm herself by it. The chambermaid's silence was bought not only with a salary, but also with gifts, which were often payment for complicity in small and big secrets. A broken vase, a lost brooch, or a note passed secretly became bricks in the wall of mutual dependence. The fate of a chambermaid was often tragic, as she sacrificed her youth and the opportunity to start a family in order to serve another. Years passed, the mistress grew old, and with her grew old her faithful shadow, often left without savings or a place to live. Their relationship, which lasted for decades, could be severed in an instant by the death of one of them. And then it became clear that the maid had no life of her own, as it had been completely dissolved into the life of another person. It was a service bordering on voluntary slavery, but sanctified by devotion. In a world where women were assigned the role of living room decorations, the chambermaid was the master who polished this precious stone. She knew all the flaws and cracks, but her task was to present the world with perfect brilliance. It was a job that required not only dexterity, but also a huge heart capable of accommodating someone else's pain. And in this quiet, inconspicuous work, there was more genuine nobility than in many coats of arms and titles. I wonder how this topic is perceived in different parts of the world. Where are you from? Do you agree with the arguments presented? What if I showed you a time machine frozen in the stone and wood of old mansions? The layout of houses in the Gilded Age was specifically designed to make servants literally invisible to their masters and guests. It was a complex system of secret passages, narrow spiral staircases, and hidden doors disguised as wall panels or bookcases. Architects created two parallel worlds under one roof, which were not supposed to intersect unless absolutely necessary. The house lived a double life, a formal one, filled with light and music, and a shadowy one, where dim light and hard work reigned. Kitchens, laundry rooms, and pantries were usually located in basements or ground floors. There were no tall windows or moldings here. The air was heavy with the smells of cooking and steam, and light penetrated only through narrow transoms under the ceiling. Encountering the master in the hallway required a special ritual from the maid. She had to stop, press herself against the wall, and lower her eyes, becoming an object of the interior. This taught women humility and a constant sense of their secondary status in this space. They were part of the house, but they were never truly at home. Even the air in different parts of the house was different. Upstairs, it smelled of flowers and expensive perfume. downstairs, of coal, wax, and food. Crossing this invisible border of smells was always an event, a switch in the mode of existence. A maid had to not only look neat, but also not bring with her the smells of the lower world. This required meticulous hygiene in conditions where hot water was a luxury available primarily to the masters. Cleanliness was part of the uniform. Today, these labyrinthine houses stand as monuments to an era when human dignity was measured by the floor on which one lived. Walking through museum halls, we rarely think about those dark staircases behind the walls, where feet in worn-out shoes once ran. But it was there, in these hidden arteries, that the real pulse of the house beat. Were these walls a protection or a prison? Are you ready to learn new details about how the ideal image of a lady was created? Guess how long it took to create the perfection that the world saw at balls? A society ladies' morning toilet was not just a hygienic procedure, but a sacred ritual that took several hours of hard work. It was a process of transforming a living, warm woman into an unattainable symbol of the family's status and wealth. The room was filled with the scents of powder, heated curling tongs, and lavender water, creating the atmosphere of an alchemical laboratory. The maid was the chief creator here, a sculptor who molded the perfect image from flesh and fabric. Then came the stage of dressing in underwear, the number of layers of which seems unthinkable today. The thinnest chemise, pantaloons, stockings, garters, all of this had to be impeccably clean and ironed. Every detail of the wardrobe cost a fortune and required careful handling. The maid would press her knee against the bed, or even her mistress's back, tightening the lacing until the whalebone snapped. There was something violent about this action, but it was necessary to meet the beauty standards of the time. The silent suffering of the mistress and the heavy breathing of the maid merged into a single rhythm. Hairdressing was a separate art form, requiring the talent of an architect and an artist. Curling irons heated over a fire were dangerous tools. One wrong move could burn the hair or scald the skin. The maid masterfully handled pins, combs, and hairpieces, creating complex structures on the head. These hairstyles weighed a lot and required perfect balance so as not to fall apart when moving. The mirror reflected the maid's concentrated face and her mistress's detached gaze. The whole ritual was accompanied by silence or discussion of everyday trifles, but never by complaints of discomfort or pain. The mistress had no right to show weakness, and the maid had no right to show pity, which could offend her mistress. They were both hostages to etiquette, which demanded sacrifices in the name of beauty. The morning toilet was a daily exercise in endurance and self-discipline. When the mistress finally left the boudoir, radiant and majestic, the maid remained in the room, full of scattered things and cooling water. She had to tidy up, clean the clothes, and prepare everything for the evening change of clothes. Her work was cyclical, endless, and invisible to the world that admired the result. She was the stagehand who made the magic of the performance possible, remaining behind the scenes. This morning marathon was symbolic of the entire life of a woman of that class. To be beautiful, to be perfect, to be put together by the hands of others. And for the maid, it was a daily reminder that beauty is hard work, often accompanied by pain. And who knows who had it harder in this situation? The one being laced into the corset, or the one holding the laces? If you enjoyed this story about the hidden side of fashion, please like it so we know you're interested in these details. What if I showed you a dinner where silence was louder than a scream? The formal dining room was the stage for one of the most complex performances in the life of an aristocratic household. Here, under the light of huge chandeliers, the family and guests gathered, and along the walls, like guards, footmen and maids stood frozen. It was a space where every movement was regulated, and any sound other than polite conversation and the clinking of cutlery was considered a crime. The servants in this performance played the role of invisible mechanisms, serving food and drinks with the grace of ghosts. Lunches could last for hours, consisting of many courses, and all this time the servants were on their feet. Fatigue accumulated, their backs went numb, but their posture had to remain impeccable. The smells of exquisite food teased hungry people, who often ate only simple porridge or leftovers from the Lord's table, but much later. It was a physical test of endurance. to serve a feast while being only a spectator. The silence behind the diners created an oppressive atmosphere of control. The hostess watched not only the guests, but also every movement of the staff, noting the slightest mistakes. Then after dinner, these mistakes were discussed with the housekeeper or butler, and the guilty parties were punished. The fear of making a mistake hung over every servant, causing their hands to tremble, which was unacceptable. It was a vicious circle of tension. After dinner, when the gentlemen moved to the living room, the servants began their second shift, cleaning. Mountains of dishes, crystal, and silverware had to be washed and polished until late at night. Discussions of what had been heard at the table were whispered in the safety of the scullery. But even there, fear reigned. After all, the walls had ears, and one wrong word could cost you your job. This theater of the absurd was repeated day after day, turning meals into a ritual of power and submission. For the hostess, it was an affirmation of status. For the servants, it was a school of survival and self-control. Could you stand for 3 hours without moving while your fate was being discussed nearby? When the huge house fell asleep, for some of its inhabitants, the quietest and loneliest part of the day began. The night watch was not just a duty, but a time when masks were discarded and the true essence of life in the mansion was revealed. Often, the mistress of the house, tormented by insomnia or anxious thoughts, could not sleep and wandered the empty corridors. And always somewhere nearby, in the shadows, was a loyal maid, ready to administer a sedative, adjust a pillow, or simply sit beside her. But these night vigils were exhausting for the servants. The maid had to be on guard, even when her body demanded rest. She dozed in a chair by the door or on a narrow couch in the dressing room, startling at every rustle. Chronic sleep deprivation was an occupational hazard for chambermaids and nannies. Their eyes were always red and their faces pale, but complaining of fatigue was not acceptable. It was often at night that the darkest secrets came to light. The master's late returns, strange visits, hidden illnesses. The maid on night duty knew who entered the house, when, and in what condition. She saw drunken tears and heard muffled sobs behind the bedroom door. She was a silent witness to the breakdown of the family, which was carefully hidden during the day. In the morning, when the sun rose, the night's confessions were forgotten, as if they were a dream. The mistress became cold and majestic again, and the maid became quick and inconspicuous. The night took away the candor, leaving only fatigue and knowledge that could not be shared with anyone. The darkness hid not only tears, but also fears. Fear of the future, of illness, of losing one's position. In the silence of the night, these fears became palpable, filling the huge empty rooms, and only the presence of another living person helped to keep from going mad with horror at the emptiness of life. These nights were the invisible flip side of the glittering days. They showed that wealth does not protect against emotional pain, and sometimes only intensifies it, and that sometimes the only salvation is simple human compassion, bought with a salary, but no less valuable for that. Are you ready to learn the truth about what was hidden behind long skirts and sudden trips to Europe? Scandal in high society was like the plague. It could destroy a family's reputation in a single day, closing the doors of all respectable homes forever. The most terrible secrets were not financial ruin, but women's mistakes, the extramarital pregnancy of an unmarried daughter, or the infidelity of a wife. When such a misfortune knocked on the door of a mansion, the servants became the main accomplices in the operation to hide the truth. It was a conspiracy of silence, paid for with fear and gold. The role of the maid in such a situation became critical. She had to hide or destroy the evidence. Letters, blood-stained linen, strange medicines. She became both jailer and nurse, guarding the secret from the other servants and guests. Any sidelong glance, any whisper in the kitchen was harshly and instantly suppressed. The housekeeper waged war on the curiosity of the lower staff, knowing that a leak of information would cost everyone their jobs. The journey to a secluded estate or abroad, to Switzerland or Italy, was long and painful. The maid accompanied her mistress, sharing her exile. There, far from the eyes of the world, the drama of childbirth and the inevitable parting with the child unfolded. The newborn was given to an orphanage or a farming family, and the recovered lady returned to society, leaving part of her soul in a foreign country. The maid was the only one who knew where the grave of this secret lay, Sometimes, if it was impossible to hide the pregnancy, scenes worthy of a Greek tragedy would unfold in the house. Forced marriages, threats of disinheritance, suicide attempts. All this happened before the eyes of those who served tea. The servants saw how the will of young women was broken, turning them into obedient dolls. They pitied their young mistresses, but could not intervene, being constrained by their position. History knows many examples of old servants who, when they died, took to their graves the secrets of illegitimate children, forged wills, and even murders disguised as accidents. They were the guardians of the dark side of history, its shadow archivists. Their loyalty was absolute, but was it voluntary or imposed by fear of starvation? Behind every impeccable family tree lay broken branches, known only to those who swept the leaves beneath them. These women in black dresses were living safes, the keys to which had been lost. Could you live with such a burden of someone else's guilt, knowing you could never tell the truth? The house was held together not by its foundations, but by the iron will of one woman. The housekeeper or stewardess was the gray cardinal of the mansion, a general in a skirt who was feared by both the servants and often the owners themselves. A bunch of keys always jingled at her belt, a symbol of absolute power over the pantries, wine cellars, linen rooms, and people's fates. She was the buffer between the world of the masters and the world of the servants, translating the whims of the former into orders for the latter. Her day began long before dawn and ended late at night. She knew every inch of the house, every hole in the tablecloth, every chip on the porcelain. Her ledgers kept strict track of expenses, from candles to sugar. She was the financial director of the household, and the well-being of the house depended on her honesty and ability to economize. The mistress might not know the price of meat, but the housekeeper knew it down to the penny. She hired and fired the servants, monitored the moral character of the maids, and the cleanliness of the footmen. Her gaze could silence even the most vivacious dishwasher. She was the guardian of the hierarchy, harshly suppressing any attempts at familiarity. In her world, order was the highest virtue, and chaos was a mortal sin. Discipline was maintained not by shouting, but by icy calm and the authority of experience. Often, housekeepers were women who had devoted their entire lives to service, giving up their own families. The house became their child, their husband, their reason for living. They defended the interests of the family with fanatical devotion, sometimes even from the owners themselves, limiting the extravagance of the young heirs. It was a kind of maternal care, harsh and demanding. It was the housekeeper who was the chief censor in the house. She decided which gossip would reach the ears of the mistress and which would die in the kitchen. She filtered reality, protecting the peace of the masters. Her silence was strategic, her words measured. She knew the skeletons in the closet by name because she herself had hidden them there. The housekeeper's old age was a time of transfer of power, often painful. To give up the keys meant to give up one's life. Many of them worked until their last breath, dying at their posts like old soldiers. Their departure often marked the end of an era in the life of the house, as traditions and order went with them. These women were the backbone of Victorian life. Without their invisible but firm control, the luxurious life upstairs would simply have fallen apart. They were the ones who turned money into comfort and chaos into coziness. The governess occupied the strangest and most ambiguous position in the house. She was not a servant, as she was educated, often came from an impoverished good family, and dined separately. But she was not an equal to her employers either, remaining a hired worker. This position, between two stools, condemned her to the deepest, wringing loneliness. The servants disliked her for her lordly airs, and the masters kept their distance, seeing in her a reminder that nobility does not insure against poverty. Her world was limited to the classroom and the nursery. She saw the children more often than their own parents, and often became the only adult close to them. But she knew that one day they would grow up and forget her, becoming the same cold aristocrats as their parents. Loving her pupils was a professional risk. Her attachment could be severed at any moment by dismissal. The governess saw the underside of family upbringing, the indifference of mothers busy with balls, and the strictness of fathers who demanded only obedience. She witnessed how children's characters were broken, forcing them to conform to the standards of high society. She had to teach girls not science but manners, the art of pleasing and keeping quiet. It was the upbringing of future victims of the golden cage, and she, understanding this, was forced to be an instrument of the system. The governess spent her evenings in her room, often in complete solitude. She was not invited to the living room with the guests, and going to the kitchen with the servants was beneath her dignity. Books and letters were her only friends. She lived in a house full of people, but she was isolated, as if on a desert island. An invisible wall of alienation surrounded her everywhere. She was an observer of other people's luxurious lives, a front-row spectator forbidden from entering the stage. She saw beautiful dresses and heard the music of balls, but her lot was a modest gray dress and the silence of the classroom. This daily contemplation of unattainable happiness could either harden the heart or, conversely, teach philosophical humility. Governesses were the intellectual elite among the staff, often more educated than their employers. This created hidden tension. The mistress might feel her ignorance against the backdrop of a well-read poor girl and take revenge on her with petty nitpicking. Intelligence was a dangerous gift for a woman in a dependent position. The history of governesses is the history of women's emancipation before it began. These were women forced to earn a living with their minds in a world where women were expected to be only beautiful and submissive. They were pioneers of women's labor, paving the way through the thorns of humiliation and loneliness. What happened when a maid forgot her place and asked a question? The system was based on fear, and punishment for breaking unwritten rules was instant and cruel. Dismissal without recommendations was the ultimate punishment, social murder. Without the coveted letter from her previous employer, a woman could not find work in a decent household. The only doors open to her were those of workhouses, laundries with slave-like conditions, or street prostitution. Anything could be a reason for dismissal. A broken cup, a sidelong glance, a retort to rudeness, or worst of all, knowing too much. If a maid became an inconvenient witness or dared to comment on the behavior of her masters, she was shown the door immediately. Her belongings were packed under the supervision of the housekeeper to prevent theft, and a person who had given years of her life to the household found herself on the street with a single suitcase. The fear of poverty was the whip that forced women to endure humiliation, harassment, and injustice. They saw how those who had lost their jobs lived. Poor old women on the porch, women selling matches in the wind. This specter of hunger stood behind every maid, forcing her to swallow her tears and resentment. Pride was a luxury unavailable to the poor. There was no place for the protection of rights in the system. The master was the law, judge, and executioner in his own house. The police rarely intervened in matters that took place behind the closed doors of mansions, always siding with the wealthy owners. A maid was completely powerless in the face of arbitrariness. Her word against a gentleman's was worthless. Many women who lost their jobs hid this from their families, ashamed of their fall. They spent their last savings trying to maintain the appearance of prosperity until they found themselves in complete despair. Social decline was rapid and irreversible. It was almost impossible to return to a good house with a tarnished reputation. It was the fear of being thrown out onto the street that cemented the silence. Better to be a silent witness to sin in a warm house than an honest woman in a ditch. Thousands of women had to make this cynical choice, and who are we to judge them for it? The price for asking questions was too high, so questions died on their lips, turning into bitter wrinkles around their mouths. The silence in the house was not a sign of peace, but a sign of fear, binding the souls of people on both sides of the barricades. The age of splendor was gone, leaving behind majestic museums and yellowed photographs. But the voices of those who made that splendor possible remained unheard. Most of the maids did not leave memoirs. They did not know how to write beautifully, and they considered their lives unworthy of paper. Their stories dissolved into time like breath on a cold window. We know about the balls and dresses of the mistresses, but we know almost nothing about the dreams and pains of those who sewed and washed those dresses. In their old age, many of these women remained alone. Their family consisted of memories of other people's children, whom they had raised, and other people's houses, which they had cleaned. They lived in small rooms on pensions from their former employers, if they were lucky, or in charitable shelters. Their hands, disfigured by arthritis from cold water and hard work, were the only evidence of their labor. The archives are silent about them, preserving only dry lines in the expense books. Mary made $20 a year. Behind these numbers lie destinies full of self-sacrifice. They were the fuel for the shining locomotive of history, which rushed past, leaving them on the platform. Their contribution to culture and everyday life is enormous, but impersonal. Today, walking through the preserved estates, we must remember them. Those who lit the candles in these chandeliers, who polished these floors to a shine, who cried into their pillows in the attic. Without them, this beauty would be dead and cold. They breathed life into these stones with their warmth and their labor. History teaches us to look not only at the formal portraits, but also at the background. The shadows in the background often hide the very essence of an era. The maids of the Gilded Age were the invisible foundation on which the entire structure of Victorian society stood, and perhaps they were the real heroes of that time, surviving against all odds. Their silence was a form of dignity, a way to preserve themselves in conditions of complete bondage. They could not change the world, but they could preserve their humanity. And this is perhaps the most important lesson they left us. We have walked through the corridors of time, peering into the hidden corners of life concealed behind golden facades. The story of the Maids of the Gilded Age is not just a tale of everyday life. It is a saga of female strength, patience, and the ability to preserve one's humanity in inhuman conditions. Behind every great house stood an army of invisible women whose hands created the illusion of paradise on earth. They paid for this illusion with their youth, health, and dreams. But their silent feat deserves to be remembered and spoken of with respect. How did the story of these women make you feel? What would you like to learn more about in the next videos? The secrets of royal courts or the fates of ordinary women at turning points in history? Write your suggestions in the comments and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new journeys into the past.